are so excited. We have a special guest, Matthew Connor, a founder and CEO of Cyberlinks. And so, welcome, Matthew. I'm excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Ephraim. It's great to be on the show.
Awesome. And so, as always, anyone that is joined, listening in, we love active questions for Matthew. Anything about the business, anything about cybersecurity, or questions that you might have to help improve your cybersecurity. So throw those into the chat and we will make sure to add those as well. So Matthew, tell me a little bit about Cyberlinks and what you guys do. I'd love to know a little more.
Sure. So Cyberlinks, we are a full service IT and cybersecurity services company. So everything from on the IT side, from your basic IT help desk all the way up to virtual CIO services and everything in between. Then on the cybersecurity side, it's everything from internal, external pen testing, is 24/7 security, operations center monitoring, you name it, those risk assessments, the whole 9 yards, whatever you need on that side, we got you covered there as well. So we like to see ourselves as kind of a one-stop shop for both IT and cybersecurity. That's cool. Cyberlinks.
Very cool. Yeah. When did you get started and how did you get into this space?
Sure. So we started about 11 years ago. In a little town called Lexington, Virginia, which, shout out to Lexington, is modern day Mayberry. I mean, it is the safest town you will ever see. They've got the most well-funded small town police force, but the friendliest, police chief, ever, just actively engaged in the community. Everybody loves them. The whole place is just wild, just super safe. So that was really nice. So we started there, and then we've expanded into the DC area a few years ago, and now nationwide. So, Cyberlinks, I guess I got into it because way back in the day, I grew up, my dad designed electronic circuit boards and he brought home a computer, an old IBM 8088. And if you wanted it to do anything, you had to program it in BASIC. So I started programming away and, it didn't take very long. By the time I was 13, I was writing code for, different clients of my dad's businesses. So my nights and weekends growing up was just that, like all the time. So I got used to those 20-hour work days really early on. And then I joined the Army to kind of escape all that hard work. True story. And, I joined there, got into Army Intel. I learned Mandarin, Chinese, and Spanish. And then I got to use my kind of IT and cybersecurity, well, before really cybersecurity, more the IT skills, with the Intel field. And we did some really cool stuff there that I'm not allowed to talk about, but it was, just the most exciting and rewarding experience. And then after 10 years there, I got out and started my own company, and here we are. So
that's amazing. Yeah. Congratulations on all the success and kind of the roadmap to it. So obviously you guys you're very in a very unique position because as a consultant, as a MSP, MSSP, you've touched so many different clients, right? Yeah. So you get to see the good, the bad, the ugly. When did cybersecurity really start becoming like a big deal from your perspective, where it was more than just, there's always been kind of viruses and then you had, antivirus or endpoint protection, but when did it kind of really start shifting? When was the first time you remember for one of your clients or maybe a company you worked for that you started seeing things were starting to change?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's funny because, it's not really black and white. It really did kind of go through a transition period. And while security used to be, you have those, security is a spectrum, right? On the one hand, you've got, it's secure if it's unplugged. And if it's buried 6 feet underground and you beat it with a hammer, now it's secure. Nobody could possibly get the data off of it because it's okay, great. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got, some old Windows XP machine that's connected to the internet and it's, doesn't have any antivirus, no firewall. And it's just a a bloody mess, right? And so sure, so it's this spectrum, and I think people's understanding of that, I think it has grown a lot, and you know I'd say in the last year or two, really with around COVID, I think it became part of everybody's vocabulary thanks to ransomware. Um, you know, COVID brought a lot of kind of benefits, I think, to businesses. In one, it helped them understand that IT can be provided remotely and people can work remotely more efficiently than we may have originally thought, and there might be benefits there, which they were very opposed to prior to that. And
Yeah.
then on the cybersecurity side, ransomware became so prevalent and such a part of the mainstream news that people now are like, oh shit, this is a real thing, and how do I protect my business? And I know you and I have struggled with businesses and trying to figure out the right thing to say to somebody to convince them that cybersecurity was important before it punched them in the face, right? And but nobody really wants to hear it until they get that bloody nose. Then they want to talk cybersecurity. So I think really it was around COVID that I think that we saw the biggest shift. It was starting to a little bit, you rewind a couple of years, cybersecurity became the buzzword that was, and people started to catch on. But I think it really hit kind of its peak around, and I don't know that it's necessarily a peak, but I think COVID kind of launched it
Yeah,
a
I think,
lot.
yeah.
I think that's when I saw it. And I think it helped make it an easier conversation with business owners to say, hey, what are we doing to protect the company from ransomware? How do we protect your data? And prior to COVID, that was a harder conversation because they're like, well, I haven't done anything about it in 10 years and I haven't been hit. So I like my odds of walking in the rain with this lightning rod and not getting hit by lightning. Well, that's true. You've done really well, but I wouldn't recommend continuing to walk with that lightning rod because you're going to get hit, right? It's only a matter
Right.
of time. But so to answer your question, I think that's about it. Yeah, around
Yeah,
COVID.
that's a good perspective. I also kind of noticed that in the last couple of years, I almost feel like when we were for our perspective when we were going to market for cybersecurity, that it almost felt like we were selling insurance in some ways.
Yeah.
That's how they viewed it. They're like, oh, do I really need this insurance? And now it's starting to become like a regular part of their business. It's
Yeah.
not it's not insurance. It's actual, building out a framework, technology, resources, compliance, policies. It's a component of the business to operate at this point.
100%. And you guys started, the cybersecurity side, like what, 5 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, we
Is that
started
right?
in 2015,
Oh, okay.
and
Wow.
then yeah, that's really when we got started, and it
Yeah.
was we were really excited when we were getting started because we felt, man, this is just gonna explode, blow up,
Hmm.
and obviously cybersecurity was even a buzzword back then,
Yep.
but it didn't go as fast as we thought. Now it's growing exponentially faster, but I think compliances have a big part of that as well. So are you seeing, how are you seeing compliances?
Oh,
Yeah, how's that changing things for you?
100%. I think that compliance, I think if people, even their view of compliance has changed. I think that people used to see compliance as kind of a necessary evil and a burden. And now it's more of what I think its real intention is, and that is to help guide you down the path of doing the right thing or be thinking about the right things and putting together a plan for that. And so compliance is, I think it's the combination now, between the news from all of the bad actors, which is unfortunate, but it is positive in getting people to think about cybersecurity and what they can do, and then compliance, coming at and saying, hey, look, you've got to be doing these things. And so it's coming together, I think, for business owners. So we've got some government contractors, some people in the financial sector, and we're starting to see their acceptance of compliance, their mindset is changing. It used, just like with cybersecurity. I mean, that's what we're seeing. How about you?
Yeah, same. I mean, honestly, the same thing. And we're seeing organizations that are even not necessarily being audited by a particular compliance, but they're just being asked by customers about certain type of
Mm,
compliances, and it's moving them to action. So I
nice.
think it's encouraging in the sense that organizations, decision makers within organizations, are doing things to protect themselves that
Hmm.
otherwise could lead to a massive disaster if they don't. So
Absolutely.
yeah, was there any time like that you have like, when you say the word cybersecurity, that you think of, maybe a breach you dealt with, or a hard lesson you guys had to learn, or a client had to learn, and you guys had to get involved, that was kind of a, I don't want to say a gotcha moment, but like something that'll kind of just stick with you forever and kind of changed how you did things?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think with cybersecurity, I think that the mistake that people make with cybersecurity is in the definition. I mean, I
Right.
define cybersecurity as a process of securing all your digital or your electronic equipment, right? And so people overlook some important aspects of that. They don't have to be internet connected in order to be a cyber threat, right? So you can have some device that then connects to your computer to feed it data, and you think, oh, that's fine. But if that device is then infected, and when you connect it to your computer, it's now sending data to the bad guys. Well, that's a cybersecurity issue. So I think, and the reason I talk about this is because that process, we're never done with it. It's not like, so we do what we call a cyber stack. So every
Okay.
year we have our IT services, and then we have a bunch of cyber, kind of a la carte cybersecurity services, but we also offer a cyber stack, and it's the things that we think you should be doing now. Things like having a password manager, the 24/7 monitoring of your devices and your accounts, things like that should be done, but people probably aren't doing it. They're not, great. So if you're buying the cyber stack, now you're getting all those cybersecurity things that in 2023. So we number ours by the year. So we've got a 2023 cyber stack, and that's actually different than our 2022 stack. And
Oh,
it comes
interesting.
from those lessons learned along the way, because the it's not that the landscape is changing. The bad guys, the bad actors are changing their tactics, and we're seeing, and I know you've seen it in the last 6 months, how many, how advanced the threats have become so quickly. I mean, you take a look at it just in your email, your inbox, right, or your quarantined email. The language is so much better. They look better. They're legitimately solid attempts at screwing you over, right?
Yeah.
So they're getting really good at this, and so it's constantly changing. So I mean, we've had some things. So let's get to specifics. So I think that
Yeah.
you have to stay on top of it, and I think that we try to educate our clients on this, to say, hey, look, we're protecting you now from what's here today, and as things evolve, what we're doing today obviously won't work in 10 years, right? I mean, that's silly. So it might not even be the best thing to do in 6 months from now, right, or a year. So we stay on top of it. But I mean, some of the things that have changed just in the last 6 months, I mean, we've seen uh, uh, how about a sim cloning? I couldn't believe this one. I don't know if, for those not familiar with sim cloning,
Yeah.
it's
Explain
like,
explain sim cloning for someone that doesn't know
yeah.
it.
It's like in the movies where you see somebody's cell phone and they sneak into the locker room and they put their phone there, and then they've cloned the guy's phone and they walk out, and then like, oh, now we're getting all the that's an actual thing. And that is something that, now maybe it doesn't actually go like they show on the movies, because nothing's quite like that. It's not quite as slick and as fast and as easy. However, you can actually clone somebody's sim and be then receiving the calls and texts that they receive, just like you see on Mission Impossible and all these other movies. That's a real thing, but it was really limited to super high value targets, because it's not easy to do. You could, we've seen in the past a lot of valuable targets get their even Zuckerberg got his, stolen, his SIM, because you call up the phone company, you tell them a few things that you've gleaned from social media and from the dark web about them. You've convinced now Verizon or whoever the carrier is that you're now that person and you want your account transferred to this new SIM. Okay, Mr. Zuckerberg, here you go, boom. And now it's going to the new SIM. So now with that, very quickly, you can gain access to their account just by logging into their email, getting the SMS code and logging in. Okay, well, that's kind of a form, but even scarier and more effective is the SIM cloning, where now it's two SIMs working on the same network, right? And so when they get that text, you're like, oh, I didn't try to log into my email, so you don't think anything of it. But the bad guy has now got the code to log into your email, and they do. We saw this with a relatively small private equity firm, and we were blown away that actually happened. So I think the lesson learned there is you've got to be monitoring those accounts 24/7 to see it, because if you don't see it, you don't find out until it's too late, after a ton of money is stolen, after reputations are damaged. So that one really blew me away. I mean, we've got a few more examples like that, but I was like, really, SIM cloning? Yep. So
yeah, we ran into the first time that happened to a client that we were able to recognize not too long ago. Same thing. And the criminal, whether they were really in Florida or used a VPN, it came out of Florida, and they had multi-factor authentication turned on in the network, and there was a successful authentication into the network. And one of the first questions is like, how did they get in if we have multi-factor authentication turned on? And he was doing some kind of SIM cloning. We've also seen where especially with Apple IDs, if they can get that Apple ID login, that's huge, because one of the nice things Apple does with the iMessage is you can look at it on your laptop, on a iPad, on a iPhone, any kind of device that you can log in with the Apple ID. So if they get that credential, they now have access from another location. They just have to log in, and they have all the text messages, all that kind of stuff. And so we saw that kind of authentication as well. And right, nothing would prevent that from, nothing would stop and say, oh, this is a criminal and this is legitimate. If the password matches, the multi-factor authentication goes through, they're in the network.
Yeah. And, I think so interestingly, and going back to the fact that, cybersecurity is always, changing, right? I think a lot of people don't realize that Microsoft is the world's largest cybersecurity company. They collect more data from around the world than anybody else. They see, they've got godlike vision when it comes to the what they get to see and tweak. And the interesting part is, I got to commend them on actually improving how they're going about stuff, versus just saying, hey, look, we've given you all these features and leaving it to for you to kind of deal with. And I say that because they're now, they've improved their MFA requirements, right? So now their basic isn't just, yep, approve it. It now pops up with the code, so you've got to type in the number. Great. And going right back to Apple, it was a lot easier, when there was the great fappening, right? Where all these celebrities had their iCloud accounts broken into by a hacker, and then, all their private photos released on the dark web. That Apple had made, some great advancements very quickly to then, implement really good, MFA. And even then it was just a click to approve, but now it's type in the code. So before, you might accidentally, give somebody a bad person access, because you're like, oh, maybe it's just my iPad notifying me again or something.
Right.
But now you got to type in that code on the device. So I mean, for both of those, cybersecurity is such a big, it's a team sport. It really is. Nobody can do it alone. Nobody succeeds alone. And when it comes to cybersecurity, the same is true. It is a team sport for sure.
So what do you guys, let's say internal IT director, wants to have a conversation with you, they're worried about something like SIM cloning or some of the items we're talking about. What are, if you walk us through the stack, what are the things in the stack, in 2023 that how are you combating this? What is Cyberlinks doing for their customers to prevent this from happening?
Sure. So, pardon me. So big one is I wouldn't even say big one. So there are several. The password manager is a great one. So, not only do we, is that, so it's one thing to offer a password manager, but it's another when you roll out that password manager, you imported everybody's passwords, from their browsers and everything. Then you wipe out those passwords in the browsers. You stop them from asking if they want to say passwords, and you move people. Now you fully migrated them to using, and we use Keeper Security. Big fans of Keeper. Great US based, company. They were the first password manager on iOS. They got a great story. And so we push out Keeper to our clients, and I think that's a great.
And you guys are actually helping implement that Keeper so that it's
exactly.
Like it's not like, oh, here's your login, start using it. It's like we're gonna help you walk you guys through this transition.
That's exactly it. So import it on, get it on their phones, import everything, get it on their computers, import everything. So now it's okay, great. Now it's filling in their passwords on their browser without them having to worry about it, and only having, to worry about their one, master password. So yeah, it's implementing that, because you can have all the right tools. I mean, what good is all the right surgical equipment in my hands? I'm not going to be able to, do your open heart surgery. So I got the right tools, but if I don't know how to use them and they're not implemented right, I think I just killed somebody, right? It's not going to work out well.
Yeah.
So, you've got to have the right tools.
By the way, there's so many companies, and this happens in IT departments as well. They're so focused on the technology to protect the organization, and I like to liken the illustration of, say you're in Taliban territory and you need to protect this village. Yeah, you need weapons, but you need personnel just as bad, right? One guy with
knows how to use them,
weapons, right. or no guys, and just a boatload of weapons is going to do absolutely zero. And so you can put all the tools in, but without having that full stacked personnel that knows what they're doing, those weapons are no good.
I love that analogy. All right, I'm going to steal that if you don't mind. That is fantastic. Oh, yeah. Totally. So we're big supporters of that. I completely agree. I mean, we can give them all these, the guns, but if they don't know how to use them and they don't use them properly, they have no use. So rolling out the password manager is really important. So we also include in there the 24/7 SOC monitoring, and that also encompasses their Microsoft 365 account as well as their endpoints. So all of that is monitored 24/7. I think, as we've kind of discussed, I think that's a really important, part of that, because without that, the bad guys do their bit, and then you find out you've been compromised when it's way too late. And then we do conditional access. So that comes as part of their, it's a Microsoft, either they're already, so it's a Microsoft kind of add-on, right? So it's Exchange Plan P1, right? Or you've got to have a Microsoft Business Pro, or I think E3 or E5 license. So depending on the licensing, we either add it to their existing license, or we help implement that conditional access. And for those who aren't familiar, the conditional access is great, because then you can say things like, hey, look, let's say we're an Iowa-based mortgage company. Well, none of our employees travel, and nobody will be logging in anywhere but Iowa. So if there are any logins outside of Iowa, then no. Certainly none outside the U.S., because we're never, right? So we could block foreign logins even with MFA. Just like, nope, sorry, you're outside the U.S., it's not happening. So you can do stuff like that, and we tailor that to each company, because every company is different. We have companies where people travel constantly internationally, and so that becomes how do you balance that and protect them? So then the obvious solution there is, well, you can only log in from a registered device when you're outside the US. And honestly, even inside the US, it's a great policy. But again, every company is different. So the conditional access becomes really important. That's an important part of securing that Microsoft account. And I think for a lot of companies, that's their weak point, is
Yeah.
that Microsoft account. Because if you've got the end user who's there, they know their password, they're getting bombarded with all kinds of legitimate looking emails. They accidentally put in their stuff, and if they don't have MFA set up on their account, well, now the bad guys are instantly in. Well, the other thing we're now seeing is, going kind of shout back to a previous question, is those phishing attacks now are getting really good, to where the second you put in that your information, now you're taken to the authentication, the MFA page, and you get to authenticate in real time. So that used to be things where it was like, oh, that's not going to happen for a while. It's happening now. So now if you get fooled by the phishing email and you put in your credentials, you're not going to get, oh, nothing, that didn't work, right? When it was legitimately your password, because that was, the low end, not so savvy bad actor could put together that page. Now they're renting really sophisticated, great looking pages, where in real time you put in your information. It's then putting it in at Microsoft. You then get your authenticator, and you drop it in. You've now authenticated the bad guy in real time, and so it's a real.
It's not. This is, I think, important for people to realize, because before it was like building a database. Now it's like actively logging into the account as you're being fooled.
That's right. And that's dangerous stuff, because now they've got the full access to your account. And the other thing is making sure that people aren't running around with global admin privileges. So a lot of business owners, especially smaller business owners, they it's their company. They want to own and control their their infrastructure, and rightfully so. And so the mistake that they make is wanting, having maybe set up a global admin account, or given their email address global admin privileges. Well, that's a mistake, because if something happens, let's say that laptop gets stolen, or their email gets compromised, they now have the keys to the kingdom. The simple solution is you create another account. You don't even license it. It's your global admin account. So when you want to do stuff, let's say it's Jane at companyx.com. She's the owner. Well, Jane admin at companyx.com is now her admin account. She can still have ownership and control of her company, but never would anybody know that that's the name of her admin account, because it's not out there. So it's those little things like that that really add up and help secure things. And people make those little mistakes of, oh, well, I'm the owner, I need to have that. Yeah, well, that's how you get in trouble. So anyway, so that's great information. Those are some of those things.
And I think a lot. It's great for business owners to hear that, because a lot of business owners think by it's becoming less of a problem, but you still, like you said, you still see it all the time. You see organization, the owners, which is their email account, their primary account, has full control of everything. And I don't set mine that way. Sometimes as a business owner, that can be frustrating. You're like, hey, why can't I access this SharePoint site page that we just created? Hey, what's going on, right? Because the permissions weren't set right. But it's really a protection, and you can then still have an admin account that you never use, except if you absolutely need to.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to have email capabilities or licensing, but it can give you all the control that you need. This way, the bad guys don't get access to it. So you can easily be logged into both of them and easily switch between them as the company owner. So I think, we've seen too many small businesses kind of held hostage by their kind of either a bad IT company, or an internal IT person who fancies themselves irreplaceable and doesn't want to be let go, so they kind of hoard the keys to the kingdom. And so I think a lot of business owners struggle to manage those relationships, and while maintaining control and ownership of their infrastructure. So for us, it's all a matter of getting them set up in a secure way, to where even as if they bring on new people or whatever, they still have that, okay, I'm in control of this. We have this. Doesn't matter who comes and goes. We're, we have it, but it's in a safe manner. So that's kind of how we frame that for them to, kind of protect them, keep the ownership and control of the organization without kind of, sacrificing security for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How do you go about, so I guess from your perspective, my perspective, a lot of times, I don't know if convince is the right word, but persuade, get a decision maker to see the importance. If you're an internal IT person, they think, oh, well, you're still at the end of the day, you're selling them on an idea or to make room in the budget to do something that's good for the business that they might not even fully understand. What's kind of your process for that?
Yeah. So, it really depends on what it is. So if you're saying things like, let's say the cyber stack, for instance, how do we, convey the importance of this level of cybersecurity for their company? I think the only way, first of all, it's for a company that is, focused purely on expenses and reduce, mitigating those expenses. It becomes a tough sell. But the approach that we're taking now, and we will see how this plays out, is one of kind of teamwork. And if you use their kind of language, and it's how do, these are the company goals. So we don't ever kind of refer to ourselves as cyberlinks. It's always we as as their company. So let's say Fit, right? So how do we do this, as Fit Solutions? Our goal is this to, and then kind of letting them see that these are the worries, and asking them, what they think we can do. Here are some options, then, and that we think are good, but, is this important? How do we go about mitigating this? But I so it's really, really tough, for a company that's kind of anti that. But I think so one of the tactics we're currently, implementing to kind of help people help themselves, right? Help us help them, is the news. There are so many examples now in the news. So as they come up and we bring these up, like, hey, this just happened. I want to make sure that this doesn't happen to us because it is actively going on. I want to implement this. I think it'd be great. Then they're like, great. So far, we've seen massive success every time that the kind of grenades go off near them. So when it's a family member, another company that they've seen or know, it becomes real for them, and they act very quickly. So we're having some success with saying that, hey, look, this just happened. This is what we want to do. And for us, we like to keep everything kind of short term, right? We don't do long-term commitments. So we're saying, hey, look, let's try this out. I think it's really important for the next, 3 to 6 months, until at least this stops. But then let's reevaluate. It's not like we have to buy this forever. It's like a security system. If we feel comfortable after 3 to 6 months that we like it, or maybe it's garbage and we want to try something else, cool. But I think this is going to help us keep the bad guys out for the next 3 to 6 months. It'll give us some, so that's what we've been going at, recently. And I'd say it's been better than just waiting for them to get punched in the face. Because I couldn't figure out for the life of me, how do I persuade people, before they get hit? Time and time again, it's not until they get hit that they're receptive. But I think as a whole, they're coming around. And I think by kind of speaking to them as the part of the team, how do we collectively do it? And I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm trying to keep you safe, so I don't look bad and you don't get hurt, because if you get hurt, I get hurt, right? So it's in our mutual best interest to keep everybody safe here. I don't know. How about you guys? I mean, what is that?
I think what you said is really important. I think breaching the subjects on a regular basis, at least on a quarterly basis, and also putting it in writing. So I'm a big I've learned some lessons in my career where I didn't say something, or I maybe did it, but it didn't stick, or I didn't say it loud enough, or I didn't put it in writing.
Yeah.
And then that kind of came to bite me. And so I feel it's a duty, a responsibility, an obligation for every person in IT or cybersecurity to point out to either their clients or their boss or whoever it is, because they're being hired to protect the organization.
That's right.
Right. So even if they don't take the recommendation, the fact of making the recommendation on a regular basis is fulfilling your duty. So let's say there's a big risk because, let's just say an organization doesn't have MFA buttoned up all the way, and there's some exceptions and this and that, and it's a risk. Regularly bringing it up might wear them down to make a decision to actually, implement the right thing. But if they don't, and then there's a data breach, you're not being hung out to dry. You're like, hey, yeah, remember we've talked about this literally every quarter, and I put it on every single report that I've given to you since I've worked here, right? And so now you're gonna not be the guy that has to get fired and a change made. You're like, this is the guy we should have listened to. Let's finally listen to what he has to say and let him, have a little more authority in this space.
That's a really good point, because, I've got a lot of friends who have, who like this strong arm tactic of saying, hey, look, this is what we're advising you to do, and I need you to sign off on this to say that you're not doing it, right? To kind of mitigate our liability, because I'm like, that's rough. I mean,
yeah,
that is
good. I've never done it, but I've always wanted to do it. but I do take the thing of putting it in writing, and delivering it, and making sure that the delivery is an email that always can, that kind of thing.
I think that's really smart. I think that's a good balance to say, hey, look, we're on the same side. Because I think the problem with that approach is more of it's them versus you, and that's really what you're clearly saying. Now you're saying, hey, look, this is all on you. It's no longer an us team thing. And I don't really like that, and I could never really get behind it for that reason. But I think you strike a really good balance when you say, hey, look, we're doing these quarterly assessments. I'm telling you every quarter, this is really what needs to be done. You're at the end of the day, you're the business owner, and I'm here to support you and we don't know all of the things that are going on with the business, so we can't make the decision for them. All we can do is advise what's best on the cyber, on the security side, and say, this is best on cybersecurity. But in terms of business, decision, that's not our call to make, right? So at the end of the day, to be a good team player, sometimes you got to take no, or not right now as an answer, and say, okay, it's not right now. But I've done my bit to tell you, what needs to be done. And when it is time, we'll be ready, willing, and able, and eagerly implement it. So I really like that tactic. I think that's a great idea. Now you guys you have like a formal quarterly, business review that you do, right? Or you call it a technology business plan?
We do it formally. It is, not only is it formal, it's in person if we can do it, if not on Zoom, but cameras on. We're going through a written document so we don't just verbalize the ideas. We actually put it on paper, and they get a copy of that as well. And so I think it ties back to an IT person or cybersecurity person might make a recommendation. They get a no. It might even be a really hard no. And then they're like, okay, it is what it is. And there's kind of a balance of like pushing it till you're alienating yourself from the decision makers. They should never feel that you're on your own agenda. They should always feel that you're there to support them.
Yep.
But bringing it up again, hey, I know we talked about it. I know it's a no. I just want to mention we really should be doing cyber awareness training. And if something happened, I know you might be mad at me if I didn't make the recommendation. So I'm just going to make it one more time. And I hope that maybe we can consider it at some point, right? Yep. Would you be opposed to talking about it again next quarter? Right. So now you're kind of getting in a rhythm. And after a while, they're like, man, this guy's really here looking out for my best interest.
Yeah.
he keeps talking about this thing. Like, I don't really want to do it, but I'm going to give it some consideration. And at the very least, it wasn't like one time. Now they completely forgot about it, and they're like, "Why did you never tell us?" One of the big things where we get customers, and I bet this is probably the same for you, is it's not always just bad support. It's often that there's not a proactive component of consulting happening with the organization that is there. And so they're like, they could even be doing, I've seen scenarios where the company was doing a pretty good job, but they still lost the client because the client didn't feel like they were getting that.
That's right.
That executive level consulting guidance. And that was kind of, a deal breaker for them. They needed to move the organization a certain way, and they needed that level of expertise.
Yep. No, 100%. It's funny because we got a client, literally one of our most recent was for exactly that reason. And their current group was doing a really decent job for a long time on the IT, support side. And they just felt that they were not getting, they weren't being proactive in their support. So yes, they were giving support, but in terms of security, they didn't feel like they had a partner who was really on their side. And I think that balance is so crucial for business, for whether it's an employee, internally or an external partner, to really be a partner and be on their side, working towards their goals, versus it almost seems like a semantics difference, right? Where you say, well, I'm selling them a product, right? Oh, sure. At the end of the day, you're a separate business and you're selling products and services. And if you look at it purely that way, you could easily just become a, kind of a bastard of an organization that only cares about money. And you pay your employees the absolute minimum. You charge everybody as much as you can. You provide the least you can to maximize your profits. And who wants to do business with somebody like that or work for a business like that? Versus on the other end of that spectrum, being a true partner who cares about, the implementing the goals and executing for that business to help them succeed. Because when you do that, and that's your real focus, then the things that have to go into making the team successful, happen. When it's just a matter of, hey, my goal is to sell you as much shit as I can sell you. Okay, you know what? I'm busy right now executing for my business. I'll come buy your wares later if I, get a chance. No, nobody wants to be sold anything. They want to buy what they need in order to succeed. They don't want to be sold crap. And I think a lot of businesses have a hard time seeing that difference. I know you clearly do, something very similar, where you're really focused on understanding their problems and solving their problems, whether you get to help them or not, whether you're working with them or not, which I think is the right focus. And I think businesses really, I think they see that. They see it from that first sales call all the way through to, 10 years into the relationship. They know that they've got a partner, not somebody constantly selling them services and products. Because
I like that.
Yeah.
And this is, by the way, if there's an internal IT person not using, an MSSP, they can use this exact same strategy. If you're the IT manager and you want to go to IT director, you want to go to CIO, one of the best things that they could be doing to get themselves promoted is, asking to have quarterly planning sessions with the executive team, and not walking in with all your ideas ready to talk, putting it on paper, visually looking very nice, categorized in sections, and help them manage their budget, help them manage their strategy, give them good, better, best options, and then support whatever they, 100% support where they want to go, even if it's not necessarily what you feel is best. But you've given the information, you've given the options, you help them understand the risk, and then you back the play. I mean, that's honestly one of the best things, internal or a consultant, anyone could be doing for decision making of a business.
No, that is excellent advice. And I think all too often people get caught up You know, and I love that you brought it back to that individual, because it's no different whether you're that individual or you're a whole nother company. It's that focus on helping the company execute. If that's your goal and you're there to help the team win, people see that. If your goal is to go in and do the least amount possible to get the most pay possible, well, then you're no better than that company that is just trying to maximize their profit and doesn't give a crap about, you know, who they're selling it to. That's
Yeah.
not the way to do it. Go in, be a team player, give them, you know, and, you know, I love your idea. Go in with the report and give them the options and back the play.
Yeah.
Sage advice, man.
Man, well, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the Breach Report. I think we covered
Thanks
a
for
lot of
having me.
topics. Yeah, we got some really, really good advice that organizations could implement, and we got a good implementer here with CyberLink. So thanks for visiting and coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.
Awesome. I
Appreciate it.
appreciate it, and we'll be in contact soon. And thank you for everyone for tuning in, and jump on, join us for the next Breach Report. We're excited to go over more topics that can help impact your business for the better and protect from a cyber breach. Thanks, everyone.